Hi, welcome to the Voice of Creativity podcast brought to you by the International Advertising Association. I'm your host, Brennan White. Today's guests are Michael Hendrix and Panos Panay, authors of the recent book, Two Beats Ahead, What Musical Minds Teach Us About Innovation, which has to be the best book on creativity, probably in the past decade or more. You guys should check that out. We talked about a lot of cool things that you're gonna love. Creative people as entrepreneurs, the Open Music Initiative, even things like NFTs and cryptocurrency. It's really cool, wide-ranging conversation with two brilliant creative minds. You're gonna love it. So, without further ado, Michael and Panos. Hello, everyone. Panos, Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
So, the more I've looked into what you guys are working on, your book, the Open Music Initiative, and kind of everything else as a lead up to chatting with you today, the more flabbergasted I've been, so to speak. There's so much alignment between what you guys are working on. It seems like in every aspect of what you guys do and what the listeners and the audience of this podcast are interested in hearing, that it just seemed like we had to have you on. So I'm really stoked to have you today. So thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
So there's so many things I want to touch on, all the things I mentioned and then some. But perhaps to start, we can just start with a little bit of context for everyone about your backgrounds, just so they know kind of what you've been up to in the past as well as what you've been working on recently, and then we can kind of dive into the details if that's cool. So maybe Michael, you'd like to start?
Sure. How far back do you want to go?
As far as this, you want to talk about, either way.
Well, today I'm the I'm the global design director to IDEO. Sorry, it's a mouthful. I'm also a partner there, and my career has been design. I actually started in a small regional advertising firm in Tennessee back in the 90s, and uh, just climbed a strange ladder from there to here. Anything from freelancing to starting up design in a tech firm to running my own business as an entrepreneur, doing software and design. So along that route, I discovered that my passion and pursuit of music, which had been separate, needed to merge at some point. And actually, it merged when I met Panos about 6 years ago. So the musical mindset, even though I've been in this design career my whole life, there's been this musical mindset that's for a while was invisible to me because I'd never named it, but it was always present. And then through meeting Panos and having conversations with him, it started to be able to make sense out of it.
That's cool. So I definitely want to hear about how you guys met and what that was like initially, but maybe we'll go to Panos first, hear his background, and we'll come back to that if that's cool. So Panos, do you mind giving a background, some context?
Of course. My name is Panos Panay, and today I'm the Senior Vice President in charge of Berklee College of Music's global strategy and innovation. In the role, I lead the institutional strategic plan creation, as well as personally oversee a number of the campuses outside of Boston. These include our campus in Valencia, Spain, in New York City,
Nice.
which is in a legendary studio called Power Station, a newly opened campus in Abu Dhabi, which we opened a year ago. And then I'm spearheading our efforts to expand into China and also the West Coast, or most likely in Los Angeles. Prior to that, I was an entrepreneur, founded and led a company called Sonic Bids for 13 years. That's a platform that connects bands and music promoters. I'm proud that over 1 million gigs took place on the platform over the 13 years that I led the business. A lot of amazing artists got some of their early starts on the platform. Artists like Arcade Fire and Arctic Monkeys and Lumineers and many others that I had the privilege of some of them some of them who I met when they were first getting started, or Passion Pit, or a bunch of others. And then before Sonic Bids, I was a talent agent. I booked a number of world-renowned artists, including jazz guitarist Pat Metheny, Chick Corea, the pianist who passed away a few months ago, people like Nina Simone. I booked a tour for Leonard Cohen, and also South African legendary group Ladies with Black Mambaza, and many, many others. So yeah, I've had a fun life. Hopefully a heck of a lot more ahead of me still. But yeah, it's been an interesting it's been an interesting journey.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw Lady Smith Black Mambazo at Harvard maybe 5 years ago. So maybe you had a hand in booking that or something. That's cool.
Not if it was 5 years ago, and I was in charge.
No,
I was in charge of
15
all
or
their global touring. You said 15 years ago?
yeah, 15 or 20 years ago. Yeah, it was a while
If
ago.
it wa- if it, so 20 years ago, yes. As a matter of fact, I
Awesome.
may have even been to that particular show you're talking about.
Awesome.
It's oh, what's the hall called? It's a beautiful hall. It's right
Yeah,
off Harvard
yeah.
Square. Now I'm totally spacing
Yeah, I don't remember
out.
the name either, but I know that's exactly where it was. It was beautiful wood everywhere, beautiful sound. Not that
Yeah,
huge.
I don't know if it's called
Really,
Stedman. I forget. Anyway, it's
yeah,
embarrassing that I can't remember it, but
It's
for
probably
me,
not
it's
there.
already no, no, no. It's most definitely there. It's an iconic place. But yeah,
COVID changed everything.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's
No,
cool. That's
not
really,
Harvard. It's changed everything, but Harvard has a pretty robust endowment. I think they'll be around for many pandemics to come.
yeah, they're fairly resilient. The Bostonian humor, but yeah, I will say I will add, as I've been kind of diving into this, um, my professional life is I'm now seeing it differently due to the book and some of the things I've been exposed to while kind of preparing for this conversation. Um, my company is, I'm a music major turned entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. My business partner is a creative. In fact, our VP of growth studied under you, Panos, at Berkeley, John Lahr. You may
Yeah, of
remember
course.
from a few years ago. Yeah, and so it turns out like I'm unintentionally attempting to do I think what you guys are talking about, and then our company focuses on us building a software for creatives. So this ended up kind of like blowing my mind 10 times over when we were doing this. Um, so this is really cool. I'm really excited to have you guys. And there's like so many things to talk about. But one of the things that I'd love to hear is it sounds like Michael mentioned you met about 6 years ago. What was that like? Did you guys were you like was there a matchmaker or did you just kind of stumble across each other and find out that you appear to kind of see eye to eye in all these cool big projects?
I can guarantee you that no algorithm would ever match Michael and me. So it can, to my knowledge, there's no Match.com for friendships. Um, so no, we met by complete coincidence at
Oh wow.
an innovation conference in Boston that was put together under the auspices of actually the City Hall,
Oh
and it
wow.
was at Mass Art. So Michael can tell the story uh, in more detail than me, but it was uh, again, you have this intuitive connection with somebody, and as we've said, if we had sought to meet somebody who would help us launch an institute for creative entrepreneurship at Berkeley, start an initiative that's all around simplifying the way the rights owners are identified in digital music, writing a book about the mindsets of musicians, sharing a bunch of fun meals and traveling to a bunch of countries together and avoiding killing each other, um, then I just don't think that it would have ever happened. Uh, you know, so that's a lesson from Two Beats Ahead right there, that ultimately collaborations are more about an intuitive connection that you have rather than sort of, creating some sort of clearly defined box and looking for people that fit within that.
Yeah, I forgot the quote. I even had it in my notes. It was something to the effect of, I think John Legend had a part in your book about how it almost to me almost sounded like an HR comment, but it was like getting the right team together is more important than, I forgot how he said it, but really, really cool quote about kind of exactly what you said. You know, putting the right people in the room and making the context right is almost more important. So that's cool. Michael, was that your experience too of meeting Panos?
Yeah, I mean, we were both at an interesting point in our careers where we were seeking something. You know, Panos had just started setting up the Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship at Berkeley. I had just become a partner at IDEO and was asking where, what new places could I take design? And so, interestingly, in Panos' search, he ended up at Stanford, checking out the D school, learning about IDEO. And so he was going from this music space into this design space, and I was in this other space where I was going from music into design, or design into music. And so when we met, we both were in this mindset of seeking opportunity, and with a curiosity of not knowing exactly what it would turn into. So, um, you know, we literally we just met in the whatever the green room was at that place. It was more like backstage, and had a quick conversation. Just hit it off because we were curious about each other, and we were both interested in what the other was pursuing, and that led to me being a guest lecturer at his first course, for the Berkeley Institute. And from there, it just grew. But it was just like you said in the book, we do talk about this idea of listening and being open. I think when a lot of people think about networking, even, which is a word I usually run away from at
Same.
conferences, which when you go into those places and you're looking for you're hunting, it's different than seeking. Like, so
It's
hunting is like,
transactional.
yeah, you're trying to, like, exactly, you're trying to win, you're trying to get something from somebody. And I think in our case, we weren't interested in getting anything. We were just curious and exploring, just like two musicians sitting down and starting to play our instruments together.
That's cool. And it feels, just from kind of reading about everything, it feels like there's even a bigger mission out there. Is there, I'd love to get into details of the Open Music Initiative in the book and all that stuff, but they all feel like they're pushing the same big rock up the hill, and maybe it's a huge mission. Do you guys, I don't know if you've written it down or anything or talked about it, but like, do you guys feel like all of these things are related and that there's a common mission for all of them?
I've been reflecting a lot on my journey and even this book. And the common thread for me has always been to create platforms that give people, and creative people in particular, uh, a an opportunity to grow and ultimately express themselves, and hopefully connect with somebody in a meaningful way. So whether it was when I was an agent or with Sonic Bids or at Berkeley or with this book, is in many ways a celebration of all those people that I've had the privilege to work with, serve over a career that, I know it makes me sound old, but it's almost 27 years now. And I think when you're younger, a lot of this journey is about you. But as you get older, you realize it's about everybody else. It's about giving. And to me, that is, I think, whether it's open music or whether it's the work that we've done together at Berkeley, Michael and I, that is, I believe, the common thread.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Michael,
yeah,
do you feel the same way?
yeah. It's I mean, similarly, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy being a creative director. Um, and we've actually talked to a lot of producers in the book about, like, their philosophy of producing, and I recognize at some point in those conversations that we were having with them that that's what I like to do. And as I look back at my career, it's about unlocking the creativity of other people that excites me the most. Either seeing the light bulb go on and they learn something new, they stretch into new spaces, they achieve something they didn't realize they could achieve before, especially in artistic endeavors. That's the place I get most excited. And it could be in a band when you're working together and an accident turns into this amazing new sound you've never heard. It could be in the design project space when a team makes a breakthrough from their research. It can be with a graphic designer when they just like blow your mind when you see the new layout they've done. These are all moments for me that keep me going and keep me excited.
That's awesome. And the cool part is that is apparent, right? Reading the book and kind of seeing what you guys are doing in various projects together, it is apparent that there's a mission here to kind of improve the lives of creatives. And one of the things that resonated with me about that is my company, my software company, the stated mission for the company is to unlock the power of the world's creatives. And so reading your stuff and kind of seeing what you guys are working on, it just, kind of like I said earlier, kind of blew my mind, and was talking to my team about it. It's like, it's funny that you guys are in Boston as well. We've never really met prior to this. Michael and I chatted once, but it was like I'm embarrassed I haven't connected with you before, because it seems like you guys are working on a similar mission, but from a totally different approach. Like the way we approach that is software is eating the world. Can we build software to help businesses understand their creatives better, right? Because as you guys get to in the book, it's like a totally different way of thinking, and sometimes there's communication issues between creatives and traditional business. And so we're taking this, like, can we build a bridge approach so that businesses can value their creatives more effectively, and creatives can communicate their ideas better, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys are kind of, as far as I can tell, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm curious, seems like you're working on the same mission, but from a more holistic, almost bigger vision. Is when you guys get into things like creative entrepreneurship, is that something that is that a framework you're teaching the creatives themselves? Or is it something that you're teaching the businesses, you hire for these types of people? Or is it some sort of mixture of those things?
Well, both the institute, the course that Michael is teaching, which has subsequently become a minor at Berkeley, and the book are really about instilling the confidence within creative people that all the instincts that they need to be able to develop a successful career. And I like to use the word success in a self-defining way rather than in the way that somebody else defines it for you. But for us, it's about creating this confidence that they have these mindsets. They just need to apply a different label to it, and they need to see their transferability ultimately into other areas. So whether it's listening, collaborating, iterating, we're talking about demoing, or reinventing or remixing. They may see this part of their creative expression that they do intuitively, but it's also applicable in so many other ways. So that's the way that we see it. Now, we also believe that the business world has a lot to learn from the way that creative people relate, inspired, connect, communicate. So that is the premise of the book, and I think the work that Michael and I are doing together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's awesome. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Well, we believe that the things we're talking about in the book are applicable to everybody, whether you're a student in a creative field, as we've literally taught, or an executive, which we've also taught. And the idea is that we're demystifying creativity in some sense, because I think a lot of us come into this field confident in our skills, but not really clear on how we do it. We just know that, we're creative and, don't cramp my style, man, I'll figure it out kind of thing. But, and I practiced design, like I said, I started advertising for 15 years. I was a designer like that. I just, I've kind of figured out, I guess, how to create the conditions around myself to be successful, but I didn't know how to name it or talk about it. So um, at some point though, I realized, and this is when I met Panos and actually at IDEO too, when we started talking about design thinking and kind of unpacking these different ways of approaching problem solving, that actually having some frameworks, having a mental model that allow you to go from A to Z um, is beneficial not only for your own uh, sense of progress through something, but also for collaborating with others who may not understand how you work, right? And this goes to your whole suits versus creative thing that you brought up earlier, Brennan. It's you know there's I've been in the industry a long time, so I know that world of where it feels like you have this natural divide, this fault that no one can cross, and a lot of that's just due to misunderstanding of each other's goals, values, um,
100%.
motivations. But one thing we hope from this book is that there's some shared understanding, for us, and I would imagine for you too. It comes through this entrepreneurial mindset of starting to just asking, like, how do you generate a new idea in the world, and how do you put it in the world and make it successful, right? And you can do that with a business, you can do that with a song, you can do that with some another kind of creative endeavor like an advertising campaign or a product design, etc. But if you get it to that simple question of how you take something from an idea into something present in the world, it's a good mechanism to start understanding each other. So in the book, what we try to do is show those connections between the musical mind and the business mind through entrepreneurial actions. And so we thought the best way to do that is like, let's focus on musicians that have actually done things successfully outside of their art. And that's why you have Pharrell. That's why you have Imogen Heap. That's why you have Jimmy Iovine, because they're illustrating that very concept.
So yeah, getting into the book. So I think I'll just say it because it make sure everyone knows this book is two beats ahead. What musical minds teach us about innovation, and it's a phenomenal book. And I think hit on one of my favorite parts, which is you guys almost took like the Harvard B School case study approach, but for cool people rather than nerds, right? It's like, right? You talk about Pharrell, you talk about Justin Timberlake, you talk about Beyonce, you talk about all these cool people who also did, as you said, awesome entrepreneurial things. And you kind of like tell us about them. So I had a lot of questions about that. One would be, how did you guys how do you guys approach that? Did you happen to just like over your careers have all these stories lined up and you were like, I got to put these in a book? Or when you set out to write the book, did you actually go, nail a bunch of interviews? And if so, how did you choose who to talk to and how did you structure that? It seems like there's each chapter had so many good little stories that, it's like, it's just like, you forget some of the great ones. There's so many. And so I was just, to me, thinking about how you guys went about it uh, is actually half the fun. Like how do they make this happen? How do they get these conversations? I'd love to just hear about that process if you don't mind sharing.
Well, it's just about everything that you just mentioned. So some of them were intentional, meaning once we decided to write the book, we went and asked certain people to talk. Some were conversations that either me or Michael have had in different contexts with different musicians. So some of the interviews there with Justin Timberlake, with Pharrell, with Gloria Estefan, these are interviews that I had with them when we hosted them at Berkeley. And then we also didn't want to just talk about stories of only well-known artists. Because a creative is a creative is a creative, irrespective of, let's call it renown or financial success. We feel that you have as much to learn from somebody who you haven't necessarily heard of, as you have from the one of the biggest stars on the planet, because their own generative process and creative process, in my view, is just as interesting. So that's sort of the background on a lot of the stories, and then you can also see that a lot of other stories are either examples of stories that fascinated us or made it or played a role in our own experience as fans of music, such as the story there about Freddie Mercury and Live Aid, way before Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, came out. We were talking about the interesting connection between Steve Jobs and Freddie Mercury at our classes. So that's a bit of an overview of how these stories and interviews came together.
Yeah, one in particular, Tim Chang, that whole story, right? Entrepreneur, musician turned venture capitalist. That was surprising to me, not only because it was an awesome story and it totally fits the thing you just described. You're right. Not someone I think the average person might be aware of, but also, I was kind of wondering, like, how did you even know? Some people you might not know. Like, you wouldn't necessarily know that I went to music school or school for music and composition major, right? People who know me through my work. How did you ferret out so many cool people that weren't, the Timberlakes or the Beyoncés? How did you know? How did you have so many cool stories? Is it just, again, like through your network, and you kind of over the years have realized that there's a lot of hidden musicians and creative people throughout, or how did you find specifically people like Tim?
Michael?
I was going to say, well, Panos is, I mean, one of the cool things Panos did at the Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship is create a Silicon Valley trip for the students. And so,
Oh, that's cool.
and the whole goal of that trip was to help the students see that a musical education could be exhibited in different kinds of careers. And so, um, there's a lot of Berkeley alum that aren't, you know, on the Grammy
Studio guys.
stage. They're doing other cool
Yeah.
stuff, like they're like making a garage band for Apple, for example, or, designing sound systems for cars and things like that. So, um, I would give Pons credit for a lot of that because not only from his network as an agent, which really helps, I think, in getting access to
That's true.
A-list
I didn't think about that,
celebrities,
but
but also, I mean, the Berkeley network is pretty amazing because the alumni go off and do such cool things.
Yeah,
I love that.
I think one of the fun things about being at Berkeley is that people come out of the woodwork and say, gee, I'm a musician or I study music, and you would just never know anything.
Where did Panos go?
Looks like, yeah. Whoa, we lost him. I believe the Cyprus internet is having trouble. We'll get him back in a minute. But that's cool. Yeah, that's one thing I've always been impressed by. One of my employees I mentioned, John, is worked with Panos or studied under him at Berkeley and has all these stories. I think he went on that trip that you just referenced, the San Francisco Silicon Valley trip.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've always heard the stories about how like he'd be just jamming and some stellar musician who's super famous would come in and add, just go like drop in on their class. So like pretty awesome. So I suppose that's the obvious answer is like Berkeley is a really good connector, as well as I hadn't thought about Panos's background as an agent, but that's cool. That's just like one of the things that blows you away. It's like every story is like, wow, they talk to these guys. Oh wow, over and over and over again, the whole book, without a break, and so it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
One
it's a
question.
powerful
Oh,
brand for sure.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Especially yeah. Being in Boston, I was like, of course I know Berkeley, but I don't know how far it goes. But apparently it goes incredibly far. Um, one other question I had about the book is as you heard, like I totally get this book, and it felt like it was like speaking to me personally, so it was awesome. But question I had was like, why now? Or are there like tectonic plates moving either in culture or technology that made now the right time to write a book like this?
Well, I can earlier I talked about demystifying the creative process. I'll demystify the book writing process. We started writing this
Yes,
book. We started
please.
working on the proposal for it probably almost 4 years ago, I think. So we saw the potential, the impact it was having on the students in Berkeley. We were doing some executive ed experiments to see how it worked in the business space, and we said, yeah, there's something here. And it just took us a long time to get from book proposal to publishing deal to actually writing the book. And then writing the book, we had a number of hiccups we ran into. So, this book, potentially could have been out 2 years ago, um,
Well,
versus
I thought you
now.
were,
But
yeah, 2 years is not too long. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I know nothing
but it
about the book world personally, but I thought you might have said 5, like 2 years is not too long.
yeah, it
Um,
took a long time to get it done. But I mean, the whole time. I mean, if you look back, I mean, we're definitely have a recency bias because of the pandemic, and so it's that really colors the way we're seeing the world right now. But I would say, we all know before the pandemic or the last 4 years, it was quite a tumultuous time, and we saw a lot of social upheaval happening um, globally. So, from our perspective, at least we were thinking, what the world needs more than um, anything right now is people who have a creative perspective that can look at ambiguity with interest, hope, and curiosity, especially when the situation around them is changing all the time. And that was a mindset from our perspective, a musician's mindset that we thought was worth sharing to help people navigate this complexity and uncertainty that we're in. So the timing, even though it feels very prescient coming out of the pandemic, but it felt equally relevant, uh, when we started writing this book, just because of the many challenges that we were seeing in the world.
yeah, it's funny. It almost felt like it was written since the beginning of the pandemic. So I think I don't want to say you benefited from it, but it's like the timing was certainly not made worse by everything that's changed even more dramatically since you started. So that's cool. So I'm just wanted to do one housekeeping note. Panos, I don't know if you can hear me, but it says you need to refresh your page. Okay, we can hear you fine. Yeah, no worries.
Cool.
So yeah, you and I can continue talking. We can just
Yeah.
edit that back together at the end. It'll be fine. Um, but another thing that I wanted to know is because you had so many people, and maybe you guys kind of answered this a little bit more in your answer of how you met so many awesome folks. But how do you guys? What is the secret to a great interview? Right? I probably should ask this question 40 minutes ago or whatever. but but you guys got a lot of great quotes out of a lot of awesome people, and we've already answered how you got the awesome people. But I'm curious, like, is there is that a skill? Is there something you guys are doing when you're meeting these people just to get so many kind of like really, I don't know, like gems, right? You had like almost every chapter and almost every person had a very quotable, highlightable. I was listening on an audiobook and I had the Kindle version. And oftentimes I do both simultaneously so I can actually go through it faster. But I kept stopping and highlighting things. It's like this quote's awesome and this quote's awesome. And so I guess one of my questions is like, how is there something you guys are doing when talking to these people that's like eliciting such kind of like interesting stuff? And do you view that as like a skill or a framework, interviewing itself?
I think it's a few things. I mean, honestly, I think you just have to first like people and be interested in their stories and what they have to say. And personally, I've always approached interviews less so as an interview, but more as a conversation with somebody that I'm just so lucky to be able to sit around a coffee table or post-pandemic uh, around a Zoom call and just chat, putting people in a relaxed frame of mind and making them feel that they're talking to a friend versus being quote unquote interviewed. I think it's key. Being prepared, asking good questions, open-ended questions, similar to what we're talking about in the book, just letting the recorder go. Like, if you're looking for the gem, you're not going to get it.
Hmm.
If you just let it record long enough and people you just let people riff, you will get that gem.
So
So
it's jazz.
it's music. It's music, right? Like we have these stories in there with somebody like Susan Rogers, who engineered a lot of Prince's iconic albums, and she'll tell you that part of his genius and creativity was the fact that he had so much music in him. She just kept recording almost around the clock, and that's how you captured lightning in a bottle. And I think it's
Yeah.
the same with interviews. And sometimes you don't have unlimited time with people. Many people I knew, many of the ones that are in there, one way or another. But even if you don't, if you establish just a human connection, just keep remembering, it doesn't matter who you're talking to. We're all people. And everybody has something interesting to say if you're paying attention and you ask the right questions.
Yeah,
Love that. Yeah, I
when we
think
started interviewing, we actually did, there was some early conversation about, we have a rough outline for the chapters of the book, and who do we think would be a good interview for each of these chapters. Um, and that worked maybe 50% of the time, because the reality is that one, a creative process is not linear, it's cyclical, right? So an idea might be relevant in chapter 1 and chapter 7 because of the way the creativity works. So I think we eventually just abandoned that, and like Panos said, let the tape run. But for me also, it was just about um, meeting people as a creative peer, like regardless of their celebrity status. I do believe that at their core, and we write about this in the book, that creative professionals, no matter their skill set that you can see, their tangible skill set that you can see, when you get behind that and you get to the mindsets, it's a lot of similarity, right? Just like you were saying at the beginning of this podcast, you're like, wow, like this is making so much sense to me. It's hitting me at the right time. I would say that's no coincidence because it's written for you. And I believe it's written for all the people listening to this podcast too, because it's recognizing these shared mindsets that we have as creators, and then helping put some kind of mental model to it so that you can call on it on demand as you need it. You're not left to the muses to help you be creative anymore.
that's awesome. I love it. So before we get into other topics, Open Music Initiative, various other things, how NFTs are having a moment, and maybe OMI was the OG music NFT. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know, uh, but before we go there, one other thing. There was just one idea that really resonated with me in the book that I wanted, I don't know, your thoughts on, more clarity, just maybe to just chat about for a second. Um, the idea that emotional due diligence over financial due diligence, or some quote like that, was in the book. And that was interesting. And I was wondering if that concept is more than just kind of what we said earlier, right? Like getting the right people in the right room and getting a good vibe and collaborating well. Um, if there's more to that. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there to you guys. That was such a good quote, kind of little passage for me that got my mind running. And I want to just hear your thoughts on that section of the book, if you have any.
I'd love so Panos surprisingly has decided to go get his MBA right now too. And so I'd love for Panos to respond to this question because he's
Yeah,
in
you
the
should be
middle
teaching
of
the MBA.
the financial due diligence conversations. I think it would be cool to hear that perspective.
Um, well, a couple of things. I mean, everything is a story. And we in finance, you're using numbers to tell a story. Accounting is a language, as much as music is a language. And
I buy that.
yes, don't let the numbers fool you. There's as much subjectivity in the way that accounting develops and tells a narrative as there is in a music passage. Um, but I think if you keep that in mind, right, that a creator tells you the story they want to tell you. And there's a story that you're hearing, and then there's the story that you are not hearing, but you should pay attention to. So for me, we have the illusion sometimes that if we're doing a due diligence and we're looking at numbers, we forget that if we step back from that, there is a story that's being told. And having been, by the way, on the side of selling a company, I will tell you that there is a way to take the exact same numbers and present a better story. You're not
More
committing
compelling
fraud.
version. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, any more than a good editor can take the exact same words that you put on a piece of paper and make it look a heck of a lot better, right? Um, but
It's a cool way of looking at it.
I do believe that if you step back and you say, how do I feel about this transaction I'm about to enter into? Um, how do I feel about this person that I'm about to enter into a partnership with? You know, man, I just don't believe that your feelings ever lie to you. They're there, they're real, they're true, they're yours. Um, it's not
Yeah.
somebody else's feelings. It's not somebody else's storyline. It's not somebody else's numbers. It's not somebody else's version of what the truth is or is not. It's yours. Uh, and at the end of the day, that's what counts. So, how do you feel about this? And I have found that in my life, when I let my logic determine my actions and overruled my instincts, it never really came out to anything good. It's sort of like the job that every part of your being tells you um,
Don't do this.
don't do, but every part of your head and your even everybody around just says, "Are you crazy? What do you mean? You have such and such opportunity. You're going to be making this much money. You're going to have this lifestyle, this title, these many reports, these people would kill for this, and you convince yourself that this is right for you, even though there's a party that feels I don't
The
want to be doing
logical thing.
this. I shouldn't be doing this. Um, and then you find yourself in a year and a half later, you're at odds with everybody, and either you get kicked out or you quit or you're miserable and you're trapped in it because you've also now adjusted your lifestyle to a much bigger salary and a much bigger house and two dogs instead of one, and two
That one
cars.
that one hit me. I have two dogs currently, so
Yeah,
it's like you
Instead of one.
speaking to me
Instead of
again.
one.
Yeah, it's instead of one.
yeah. Well, pets are expensive. It's a bigger industry than the music business, believe it or not, the pet industry. But that's a different podcast. So that's I think what we're talking about when it comes to diligence. Pay attention to this intuitive sense that let's face it, it's primordial and it's there for a reason.
Yeah, and the thing that kind of resonated with me is it almost just made just hearing that quote that way presented in the book, it just made it feel like okay to choose your own emotional due diligence over financial due diligence, right? Because I think as you were saying, like a lot of the pressure is like you should do this because it's the logical thing to do because some number on a page went up, but and so you do feel either social pressure or your internal pressure to uh, to go with things like that when even if sometimes you're not feeling it. And I feel like at the end of the day, you're stuck with the feeling. You're gonna have the feeling anyway. So it was cool to hear that because it kind of like a lot of my personal, so my professional career is making kind of tough decisions for hiring or fundraising or whatever, and I think that that's actually going to stick with me. That's pretty cool. So thank you.
Yeah. I can help you segue into NFTs too with that. I
Oh,
mean, I
go
don't think
for
like most of the time when these kind of conversations come up about financial decisions versus intuition, it's a risk mitigation conversation. It's like there's something about the idea that's so creative that it sits outside the norm, and that's risky. Um, it's not intuitive to someone that's looking at it from a financial side and saying, "Oh, you want to go to a smaller market,
Yeah,
with your
well,
idea. It's more niche." Not understanding that it might actually connect more and create more momentum, right? And they want you to go toward this more mainstream idea. Um, my segue to NFTs is just this: people who are pursuing NFTs for money are missing the boat because that's not what they're about. But right now, I think the conversation is very clouded about this technology because they're distracted by the big monopoly money numbers that are being thrown around for really
yeah,
bad art. I'm
YOLO.
sorry. I'm not impressed with the Beeple catalog. Um,
Yeah.
and I bet he's a cool guy, actually. So no diss on him. But you can see people pursuing, um, you know, a dollar sign versus looking at this new technology as a creative tool, right? But I would
Yeah.
argue over time the people that look
100%.
at it as a creative tool are going to be the ones that really are most successful in the space, not the ones that are chasing money.
Yeah, yeah, especially the news articles, right? And there's a layer of like, do we like the media or whatever? That's another conversation. But yeah, it seemed like all the articles were like, here's big number for crypto in art. Basically was the
Exactly.
story, right? Right? And
Exactly.
and I think there's a lot more there. And so it was, I'm a big crypto person kind of independently of NFTs, just I find it fascinating. I think it's the future of a lot of different things. But so it's fascinating to like dive into what you guys work on and see that you've been working on the Open Music Initiative, and that I don't know that it started in crypto, but it sounds like it is heavily in crypto. I'd love to hear about that. I'd love to hear about Radar because and how that relates, and it just seems very timely that you guys have been working on that for years now. But it seems like maybe now that's an idea whose time has come. So I'd love to just hear about the OMI, share that with the audience a little bit, kind of what that is, so we can maybe dive in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it sort of high level, but maybe some numbers that will be interesting to folks. There's about 60 or 65,000 songs every day that are uploaded to Spotify. Each one of these songs probably has an average of 8 to 10 different collaborators. Each one of those collaborators has an associated publishing company, and each one of those songs has two copyrights related to it, which are split by all these different entities. Between the time that I make that song and the time that you consumed it, there's maybe 50 different intermediaries. And each one of those songs could have anything from 40 to 300,000 different ways of making money, depending on where it's consumed and how big a hit it is. So I just made your head spin. Now think
Yeah,
about trying to
a
drive
lot.
what is pennies to all these different rights holders in a simple way
Fractions of
when there
pennies, maybe.
when there when there
Mhm.
is no lingua franca, if you will, for identifying who these rights owners are. And even
Yeah, there's no
uh,
protocol layer that
there
does
is no
this
Right.
yet.
protocol layer. So, I mean, all a protocol is just a piece of software that says, this is how you identify person A across anybody who's consuming what person A has created. Every entity out there identifies person A in a million different ways. So that's the idea behind open music. Get the industry to agree to an open protocol. It's open because anybody can tap into it, and the information that is exchanged within the protocol should be publicly accessible. It shouldn't be no mystery who wrote a song. It should be no mystery who produced a song. It should be no mystery who sang a song or who owns the sound recording of that particular song, or who has
Yeah,
claims to those rights of that particular song. Um,
most other
so
things that we own are pretty clear, so I don't see why music would be otherwise.
correct.
Yeah.
So that's the notion behind open music. Blockchain lends itself well to this, or this concept of a distributed ledger. And ultimately, it's something that we embarked on in 2016. Michael wrote a lot about the impact of blockchain on music in 2015, so we've been at it for a while. And I hate to say we told everybody so, but we did. I mean, we did
Told you
feel
so.
that the use of technology, or this particular technology, and the creation of assets that are by design digital and limited, and that transactions are authenticated related to the exchange of these items, that will have profound implications. But my
So
view, Brennan, is that as long as we talk about the name of the technology, it's still not mainstream. As long as we're calling things NFTs, it's just not mainstream. Because let me tell you something, not too many people talk about TCP/IP or SMTP or POP or
What I was just
IMAP
gonna say. Yep.
or IP addresses, on and on
It's
and on.
invisible.
It's
When it's
Yeah.
nobody
accessible, it's
cares. Nobody
invisible.
cares.
Right.
I don't care about the protocols that make my phone connect to the internet and enable me to send you an email or pull a media file. I don't care. I just care that it does it, right?
Yep.
So as long as we're talking about the technology and people they're falling over themselves to explain the technology and the mathematical algorithms that sort of solve these problems, that mint coins and yada yada. I mean, sure, we can have a geek out conversation on that, but that's not what blockchain at the end of the day, that's not the conversation we need to be having. What we need to be
Right.
talking about is how will this
When is this
technology
solved?
profoundly impact
Yeah.
the way that we consume media, the way that we have experiences, the way that we connect with each other, which is ultimately what technology does anyway. All technology of all of its kinds is there to enhance the human experience. That's all it
Exactly.
does, right?
Yep.
If
That's it.
there's technology that helps me go from point A to point B a heck of a lot faster, well, then hopefully I can use that time that I gain productively. I don't know, go and do something good with my time instead of just sitting around doing nothing, right? So that's the way that I see it.
That's awesome. Um, so yeah, we're coming up on the end of time. I know we got to jump, so I'll save my questions for the next time we chat, perhaps. But I guess the only other quick question I have is that vision, the idea that everyone will be paid who deserves to be paid in an efficient, global manner. How far away is that? Are we close? I don't know enough about this personally.
I think we're 5 years to 10 years away easily. I mean,
Is the
people sometimes underestimate the amount of time that it takes for technologies to take hold.
Oh yeah.
But once they do, they are fast. They spread like wildfire. I mean, the people don't seem to know that the internet took about 20 years from the early creation of those protocols to the mass sort of explosion of the internet we have today, from like 85, more, even perhaps 25 years, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
going to be faster than 25, but I don't think it's an issue of 1 or 2 years.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
beyond theory. I mean, you've got like Berkeley's piloting something called Radar, which is doing exactly what Panos described with students. You know, it's a closed system, but the more of those kinds of prototypes you get in the world, the faster it will come. So we are at a prototyping stage where people are exploring this. So it is inevitable.
Oh,
Well,
totally
look
agree.
at how long it took for Facebook to go from the Facebook, a closed network for college kids, right, to becoming Facebook. Um, Probably about a decade, even with
Yeah.
a fast-growing company like that, right?
Oh yeah.
So I know that many people listening to this podcast may say, "Oh my God, you're such a pessimist." No, I'm not. I think the 10 years to solve issues that go back 200 years is not that much time.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah. And I think it's hard to, we're beaming in from Cyprus and Boston and everything, but like half the planet isn't on the internet reliably yet. So,
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
still doing that curve a little bit too. So cool. Well, guys, this has been amazing. I know we got to jump, but amazing to meet you both in more depth. Everyone's going to love this. I'm so excited to have you. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Brennan.
Thank you, Brennan.
Hi. If you enjoyed this podcast, if you like creativity and things like that, you might love the International Advertising Association. They've been around since 1938 and currently act as the global compass for the world's creatives. It's one of the most influential and well-connected groups for marketing and advertising and creative professionals. I suggest you check them out at iaaglobal.org and perhaps become a member.